Hello. Before we start this epic, I wanted to remind you of some words from the Sermon on the Mount. Of course, you all know the Sermon on the Mount. I suppose our lives are largely ruled by the things that are written in the Sermon on the Mount. The Lord's prayers in the Sermon on the Mount. There's some other very beautiful things. There's a lovely one here that you'll remember. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And you remember that thing maybe that Solomon in all his glory was not as beautiful as the lilies of the field. Oh, and judge not that ye be not judged. It's a wonderful thing that we all try to live by and find it very hard to. However, the part of the Sermon on the Mount that has to do with our story is this part here. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them.
Charles Laughton was born in Scarborough, Yorkshire in 1899. In the 1920s, his parents sent him to London to learn the hotel trade, but he fell in love with acting and by 1931 was already starring in a play, Payment Deferred, first in London and then New York. Laughton achieved instant acclaim in films, too, as Henry VIII, as Ruggles of Redgap, as Captain Bligh. Shuttling back and forth between London and Hollywood, Laughton almost overnight became an international star character actor. He had an unconventional but successful marriage to Elsa Lanchester that lasted over 30 years, despite his many affairs with men on the side. By the 1940s, to paraphrase Billy Wilder's Norma Desmond, Laughton was still big, but some of the pictures were starting to get a little small. Searching for worthy projects, he starred in Bertolt Brecht's play Galileo in 1947, and he also began to do readings of classical literature on early television. In November of 1949, a young actor turned agent, Paul Gregory, was having a drink in a New York restaurant, and the TV set in the bar was showing Charles Laughton on The Ed Sullivan Show, reading from the Bible. Conversation ceased. The bartender stopped serving drinks. Everybody was mesmerized by Laughton's voice. Gregory immediately took a taxi to the TV theater, met Laughton at the stage door, and signed him up on the spot to make a nationwide personal appearance tour. In 1950, Laughton gave dozens of successful readings in cities coast to coast. Then, in 1951, Gregory proposed that Laughton form a drama quartet with 3 other actors to perform rarely seen dramatic works. Laughton directed 2 touring shows, George Bernard Shaw's Don Juan in Hell and Stephen Vincent Benet's John Brown's Body, featuring fellow thespians Charles Boyer, Cedric Hardwicke, Agnes Moorehead, Tyrone Power, Raymond Massey, and Judith Anderson. Then came a Laughton-directed Broadway smash, The Caine Mutiny Court-Martial, with Henry Fonda. Now that Laughton had shown he could direct, he wanted to try filmmaking. He was hugely impressed with a 1953 bestseller by newcomer Davis Grubb, and so Paul Gregory purchased the film rights. A delighted Laughton announced his intentions. When I first went to the movies, audiences sat in their seats straight. Now they slump down with their heads back or eat candy and popcorn. I want them to sit up straight again. Author Davis Grubb, himself a movie enthusiast, took a keen interest in the upcoming production and wrote lengthy letters with casting suggestions. How about Jane Darwell for the part of Rachel? No, well, how about Miss Darwell as Icy Spoon? Grubb even sent dozens of sketches to show Laughton his ideas of how the various scenes should look on the screen. Let us now praise James Agee, novelist, poet, and the finest film critic of his generation. Agee had co-written the screenplay for John Huston's The African Queen and was hired to write the script for The Night of the Hunter. Although as things turned out, Agee created a lengthy 293-page opus that Laughton himself had to drastically cut and revise just before the start of shooting. But the relationship began well, with the two men spending many hours at the Museum of Modern Art in New York viewing silent film classics, especially the early masterworks of D.W. Griffith, many of them featuring Lillian Gish. To photograph his movie, Laughton chose the great cinematographer Stanley Cortez, famous for his magnificent work 12 years earlier on, appropriately enough, Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons. Charles Laughton had met Stanley Cortez on location in Paris during the shooting of The Man on the Eiffel Tower in 1948. The two men greatly respected each other's talent. In 1952, to have a little fun, Laughton had dispensed with his dignity and appeared in Abbott and Costello Meet Captain Kidd. Once again, the cinematographer was Stanley Cortez, and the two men renewed their friendship. Gifted composer Walter Schumann was selected to write music for the film. He was already well known as a leader of a popular choral group called The Voices of Walter Schumann, and even more famous as the composer of the musical theme for Jack Webb's popular TV show Dragnet. Schumann was a key member of the production team and was present throughout the filming. On August 15, 1954, shooting began at the RKO Pathé Studio in Culver City, where parts of King Kong and Citizen Kane had been shot, and where producer David O. Selznick made most of his major films, including Gone with the Wind. Laughton was under tremendous pressure. He was still rewriting James Agee's massive script, and he faced a dauntingly brief shooting schedule of only 35 days. Concurrent with the start of production in the studio, a second-unit camera crew was given copies of maps supplied by Davis Grubb and sent to West Virginia. Terry Sanders, a UCLA Film School graduate whose impressive Civil War-themed short film, A Time Out of War, would shortly win an Academy Award, was hired to supervise the second-unit photography. Terry Sanders and his crew spent 3 weeks shooting along the Ohio River and in the West Virginia towns of Sistersville, Martinsville, and Moundsville, home of the state penitentiary. This wide-angle helicopter view by Terry Sanders would later be incorporated into the finished film, dissolving into a closer studio shot made back in Culver City. Davis Grubb's story focuses on a man simply called Preacher, a false and evil prophet wandering the riverlands with his stick-blade knife, preying upon and murdering lonely and foolish widows for their money. Gary Cooper and Laurence Olivier had been briefly considered for the role, but it finally went to Robert Mitchum. Born in 1917, Mitchum was 37 years old at the time and had already appeared in the notable films The Story of G.I. Joe, Crossfire, and Out of the Past. A 1948 jail sentence for possession of marijuana hadn't destroyed Mitchum's career. In fact, it had enhanced his bad boy image. Though Mitchum looked forward to playing corrupt preacher Harry Powell, he did have qualms about having to talk aloud to God in the opening scenes of the movie. Preacher Harry Powell is picked up by the state police and sentenced to 30 days in the Moundsville Penitentiary for the theft of a touring car. And now the story proper begins. In the words of Davis Grubb, this is a tale of two children, of all children. Once upon an evil time of hunger and depression in our land, they lived with their mother and father in a house by the river, cradled in the green arms of the great Ohio Valley. And their town was called Cresap's Landing, and the boy was called John, and the girl was Pearl. And their mother was Willa, and their father, Ben. And Ben was a good man in an evil time, a hungry time. And one day he took a gun to the bank where he drew his pay each week, and he slew 2 men. Wounded, he fled homeward with stolen money, praying in his broken mind and body that this would shield his children from the cold shadow of want that had chilled his own time on earth. Billy Chapin, just 10.5 years old, plays the part of John Harper. At the age of 8, he had won the New York Drama Critics Award as the most promising young stage actor of the year. His film credits included Affair with a Stranger, The Kid from Left Field, and A Man Called Peter. Billy had an inborn sense of craftsmanship, and with Laughton's help, he easily grasped the construction, impact, and importance of each scene.
Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad.
Yes, out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad. Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad.
Yes, but your eyes steady.
Get back, Joe. Joe, get back. Joe, back of the building.
Back of the building. Still rolling, quiet.
Billy?
Look up here, dear. Sally.
You're bleeding.
Look right up here.
Bleeding. I'm talking about you're bleeding there. Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding. Oh, you're bleeding, Dad.
Yeah. Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad.
No, out shopping. You're bleeding there. Billy? Where's your mom?
Out shopping. You're bleeding, Dad.
Sally Jane Bruce, only 5 years old, plays Little Pearl. Sally had recently won a singing contest sponsored by a local Los Angeles newspaper, and she had already appeared in a Columbia Pictures two-reeler entitled Kids Will Be Kids.
Hey.
Spit it out.
Peppermint. Here, take one, please. There's peppermint.
Yeah. Pearl, you swear too. Now look over there and laugh.
I hear to me, dear.
Who's that blue man?
Look right to me, dear.
Now say the line is to be said to me, isn't it?
Yes. Honey, look at me. And then turn and look at Mr. Locke.
Who's that blue man? Yonder.
That's it, sweetheart. Do it again, will you?
Look to me, dear.
Who's that blue man yonder?
Thanks.
Nutty, I am, eh? Nutty.
Where, Ben? Where?
Where?
And a little child shall lead them.
Come on, boy. Tell me. What did we hear?
Are you all right, Bob?
Good.
And now we're going to meet Willa Harper, played by Shelley Winters. At the age of 34, she had already trained at the Actors Studio in New York, and she had studied with Charles Laughton in Los Angeles. Her film work began in 1943 and included A Double Life and A Place in the Sun.
108, take 5.
You're in the take. Okay, Mitch, little pace.
H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old Brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts? These fingers has veins that lead straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now watch and I'll show you the story of life. The fingers of these hands, dear hearts, they're always a-tugging and a-warring one against the other. Look at 'em now. Old left hand hates a-fighting, and it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute. Wait a minute, hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree, it's love that won, and old left hand hate's gone down for the count.
Go.
Men. Again,
Yes, okay.
men.
Go back and do it again. That was right.
Be quiet, we're still rolling.
I can see Marston.
Men.
Do that again, please. Too fussy.
Men.
All right, Shelley.
Amen.
Amen.
You have all sinned.
Yes, yes.
But which one of you can say, as I can say, that I drove a good man to murder because I kept a hounding him for perfume and clothes and face paint?
All right, Shelley, start again. It's not too, darling. It's harsh on the time.
Good rule.
Now, Shelley, before you begin, just do a prayer quite high. Any kind of a prayer that you know. Loud. Loud.
Schmarzrel ad noile hen or noile hot.
Now, all right, amen.
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 You have all sinned.
Yes, yes.
But which one of you can say, as I can say, that I drove a good man to murder? Because I kept a hounding him for perfume and paint and clothes. And he come to me, and he give me this money, and he said, you take the money, and you buy yourself the face paint and the perfume. But brethren, that's where the Lord stepped in. Oh, that's where the
In 63, take 2.
Valley of death, I should fear no evil, for thou art with me.
You have all sinned. But which of you can say?
Excuse me, baby, amen.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Finish one line of the prayer.
Valley of shadow, valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Bride and staff, they come.
Amen.
This famous shot was made in a water tank at Republic Pictures Studio. Maurice Siderman, who had done Orson Welles' makeup for Citizen Kane, produced a startlingly lifelike, or maybe we should say deathlike, mannequin of Shelley Winters after taking a cast of her face. Stanley Cortez used 2 cameras, one portable and waterproof, operated by a scuba dive-fitted operator, the other shooting through glass at the side of the tank.
Look clear. Okay, let's go.
Go on, pull the boat up. Hold it, Billy. Get after him, Mitch. Come. Well, and hey, out of the weight of it. That's the position. Good boy. That's one. See the path.
All right, don't move on a parallel. Ready?
You ready? All right, heave, Billy. Hey! All right, mate. Just a minute. Don't cut. Mitch, take a deep breath and run as long as you can. You haven't cut, have you?
No. Put the knife further away from you.
And hold your head still and start.
The knife further away.
Knife further away from you, Mitch. Boys, we're rolling. Come on. The camera's still running. All right, Mitch. One deep breath. Cut.
Legendary actress Lillian Gish was born in 1893. She had played in D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, Broken Blossoms, and Way Down East before moving to MGM and starring in The Scarlet Letter and The Wind. In the 1930s, she left the movies and turned to theater, appearing opposite John Gielgud in Hamlet. Then in the 1940s, she returned to Hollywood to play cameo roles in Duel in the Sun, Portrait of Jenny, and other films. She was 61 years old when Laughton signed her to appear in The Night of the Hunter.
Wise, and young and old and everything perfect. Go ahead.
Before you open the book, honey, hold it so you see the...
Do it again.
Oh, try it again.
Hold it.
Want to try it again, just for luck?
Do it again. That was a little hurry. A little more pause between Once Upon a Time and when you shoot at him. Okay.
Now, old Pharaoh, he was king of Egypt land, and he had a daughter.
Sorry, in Egypt land, I want to say.
Now, old Pharaoh, he was king of Egypt land, and he had a daughter. And once upon a time, she was walking along by the riverbank, and she seen something bumping and scraping along down on a sandbar under the willows. And what do you think it was? Well, now, it was a skiff washed up on the bar. And who do you reckon was in it?
Pearl and John.
Not this time. There was only one young'un, a little boy babe. And you know who he was, children? It was Moses, a king of men. Now off to bed with you.
Ah, dear madam, I see you're staring at my hands. Would you like me to tell you the little tale of left hand, right hand, the story of good and evil? It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low.
Them kids is yours?
My own flesh and blood.
Where's your missus?
She run off with a drummer during prayer meeting.
Where's she at?
Down the river Summers, Parkersburg, May.
Parkersburg, Maine.
Ah, dear madam, I see you're staring at my hands. Would you like me to tell you the little tale of left hand, right hand, the story of good and evil? It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low.
Them kids is yours?
My own flesh and blood.
Where's your missus?
She run off with a drummer during prayer meeting.
Where's she at?
Downriver, Summers. Parkersburg, baby. Parkersburg.
Jesus. Go ahead, boy.
Ah.
Come on.
487, take 4.
Leaning on the everlasting arms, leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, leaning on the everlasting arms.
In January of 1955, James Agee wrote Paul Gregory from New York proposing that Charles Laughton should share the screenplay credit for the film. But Laughton was wary of being thought of as a self-styled genius or credit hog and politely declined the offer. Agee also expressed great eagerness to see the picture, adding, "I'm fascinated and about 95% confident in many things which Charles learned and showed me out of the Griffith films we saw. If they do work, and I think they will, they're going to make movie storytelling faster and more genuinely movie than they've been in many years." But James Agee never saw The Night of the Hunter. While riding in a New York taxicab on the afternoon of Monday, May 16, 1955, he died of a heart attack. He was only 45. Hobbled by United Artists' inept marketing campaign, the film was a critical and financial disaster. Oh, it did make a few year-end 10 best lists, but most reviews were mixed or worse. The film received no award nominations. It played briefly and then disappeared from theaters.
Charles did not know too much about camera technique. He depended on me completely. And I'm not saying this with ego. That's the truth. This is what Charles wanted, because Charles did not know. And as a matter of fact, I used to go to Charles's house where I would explain to him what different lenses would do and what the height of the camera would do, because of the elevation means a great deal. What is Claude saying? Anyway, but I used to go to Charles's home to explain these things, and I learned more philosophically from Charles than he from me photographically. Do you follow me? So it was a marvelous marriage of two people with two potential talents. Now, the picture was made in 36 days. And I would line the shot up, show it to Charles, and Charles would say yes or no. It was never no. It was always wonderful. He was very appreciative. And the same thing applied to Orson Welles, and of course to Sammy Fuller, and of course to Fritz Lang. It's the old story, if you know what you're doing, there is no trouble at all.
Did you have a basic idea of what you wanted to do, you and Charles Laughton, on The Night of the Hunter in terms of the lighting?
It was my concept completely.
What was it?
That's hard to explain. But what I will tell you, you say, what was your concept? It's hard to explain.
But technically?
When a painter paints a picture, say, what was his concept? It's his style that counts. It's what he thinks and feels and does, and what he reflects and what he has gone through life and so on and so on. You just don't make pictures with just light. There must be a reason. But then there's a sequence in Night of the Hunter, and it's a very poetic sequence. And I lit it in a sort of full-bodied way. But after hearing Bob Mitchum talk and what he had to say, I used to begin with, we'll say, about 10 lights. I designed the whole concept with 4 lights, because the 4 lights that I used, I think it's the 10, was the dramatic communication that I wanted the audience to get. Now, when we rehearsed the scene, and when I was changing lighting, Charles Laughton said to me, "Stan, what are you thinking about?" I was pretty close to Charles. I said, "None of your damn business, Laughton," in a humorous way. But he insisted. I said, Charles, I'm thinking about a piece of music right now. And he said, and may I ask what the music is? I said, Waltz Triste. Now, before I go any further, music plays a very important part in my work because it gives me the key to a characterization of lighting. Now, another thing happened all this time, and Charles turned his face red. He said, how right you are. Because the music of Waltz Triste is a waltz strange tempo. Beam, bum, da-dum, bum, 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 dee-da-da-da-dee-da-da. Down the line. Well, Charles was so impressed that he called, and this never happened before, he called the composer, Walter Schumann, on the set to watch what I was doing visually so that he, Schumann, can do musically. And that's how the waltz tempo was designed on The Night of the Hunter.
Would you describe The Night of the Hunter as being a low-key picture?
I would consider that as a contrast picture, not necessarily in terms of a low key, because that was shot in a very high key, but the impression of a low key. You follow me? The expression of low key is a very erroneous expression. When people think in terms of low key lighting, they think in terms of using a very small amount of light. You see? Now, I can use a great many lights and still have a low key effect or a low key feeling. We did something in Night of the Hunter, which I think is very interesting. We were at the RKO Ranch, and the scene of the little boy behind the window in the house. And we got the feeling that we should sort of dolly in to the boy. Well, it was getting late in the day, and Charles and I talked about it, about moving in. I said, Charles, I've got an idea. I think you'll like it. What I did was I used a simple iris, and by closing the iris down, just holding the boy's face gave the impression of a move in. Without the move of the light, the audience never would have been able to communicate. Photographically and directorially, if there is no communication visually, then you're in trouble. You see, what I'm trying to say to you is that I may have a preconceived idea of lighting or camera technique. Let me finish. I have a preconceived idea of lighting and also camera technique. But once you get on the set and you hear the performers talk, you change. You change because when you read the written word, it is one thing. And when you see and hear the written word, it's a completely different thing. So therefore, the sensitive artist will completely change his concept of the lighting scheme and the physical camera technique scheme. Am I clear on that point? That's a very important point. Never once did Charles Laughton, Sammy Fuller, Orson Welles, or Fritz Lang ever interfere with me in terms of lighting, in terms of camera setups. We discussed it, yes. And don't get me wrong, there's only one general, and that's the director.